Seen the astonishing speed of the ISIS advance across Iraq. But what can we expect now, and can we do anything to reverse the situation? Retired four-star general and Fox News contributor Jack Keane gave me a briefing on the situation.
The map referenced in 2006 on the left is really fascinating because it's in 2006 that we were really and truly losing the war in Iraq. And Baghdad was literally exploding.
Okay, so all of these darker areas, this was all controlled by al-Qaeda in Iraq and by the Sunni insurgents.
Absolutely. And
here in Baghdad, you're talking about most of the city.
Most of the city was definitely controlled by the al-Qaeda, by the Sunni insurgents, and the city was just hell.
So, now take us to the map on the right.
Well, the surge began in January and February of 2007, and quite remarkably, by the end of 2007, we began to achieve some tangible success. And by 2008, we had driven the al-Qaeda out of all of the regions you see on the map to the left, because they are now gone from Baghdad of any consequence, from Fallujah, from Ramadi. In the latter part of 2008, we were actually able to drive them out of the last major city, and that was Mosul. Al-Qaeda in 2008 and 2009, in their own communications to each other, admitted that we've been defeated in Iraq.
Now, this is where we are today.
What we're looking at on the map is radical Islamic movements that are spreading in the Middle East and into Africa. They're related to al-Qaeda, they're affiliates. This map represents, in the last 4 years, according to a RAND study, a 58% increase in radical Islamist organizations and the amount of territory that they control, and a double increase in the amount of terrorists that are operating out there.
I've heard President Obama personally dismiss this and say, hey, look, if a JV team dresses up, suits up like the Lakers, that doesn't mean you're facing Kobe Bryant. I mean, are these JV teams, or is this the real Lakers?
Here's the problem with diminishing the threat and referring to it as a JV team. A major lesson out of 9/11 is we permitted, unimpeded, for a number of years, the al-Qaeda sanctuary to grow in Afghanistan. You cannot let these safe havens and sanctuaries, in my judgment, grow into the varsity.
General, tell me what this map shows.
What this map actually depicts is what ISIS has been able to achieve. In black is what they actually control, physically on the ground. In dark red is what they're attempting to control, and in the lighter red is their support zones.
This is a hell of a lot of territory.
Because of the success they've achieved, they've actually grown into a terrorist army.
We're not talking about a terrorist organization. This is a terrorist army.
That is what's different, because it fights conventionally now, and it moves into towns and dominates them with combat power, just overwhelming those who are in those towns and cities.
How do you explain the astonishing advance of ISIS in Iraq in the last few weeks?
Let's just take Mosul. They've been shaping Mosul for 2 years by conducting terrorist attacks. This is vehicle-borne IEDs, suicide bombers, blowing up government facilities, police stations, undermining people's confidence in its military and in its police. And then last summer in 2013, they began an assassination campaign of key individuals. I think they waited to that target they believed had lost its resolve and its will, and then they launched this conventional military operation to seize Mosul.
Is ISIS in Syria and Iraq a threat to the U.S. homeland? Is it a safe haven for terror attacks against us?
As of right now, ISIS is not a direct threat to the U.S. homeland because they're too busy fighting a war in Iraq and in Syria. Once they consolidate and are comfortable with their own security situation, then it will be a breeding ground for the development of terrorist activities and terrorist operations other places.
And is that months from now or years from now?
Based on how this situation goes in Iraq, I would assume it's months from now.
A threat to the U.S. homeland?
Yes.
General, what's this?
This depicts what their intentions are in terms of establishing an Islamic State, a caliphate, that dominates Syria and also dominates most all of Iraq, to include Baghdad here.
I mean, this is the Islamic Caliphate that Osama bin Laden was talking about more than a decade ago.
Absolutely. This is exactly that forming before our eyes.
So, given where they are already and their ultimate designs, what should the U.S. role be going forward?
We have to drive ISIS back so we can retake those towns. The Iraqi ground forces have to do that, assisted, I believe, by our air power, and restore the natural sovereign border of Iraq. That will force them back into terrorist activities in Iraq, which they will continue to do.
But they won't be the army, the state that they have become now.
That's absolutely right. We will not eliminate it, but we can push it back to where hopefully it can be managed by the Iraqi military.
What you're saying, General, is not boots on the ground, but we're going to end up back involved in Iraq and trying to win this war all over again.
It would be in a very limited and selected fashion, though, Chris.
But the war for Iraq is not over.
By a long shot, it's not.
Is it possible, as General Keane suggests, that in a few months, militant jihadists will be able to export terror to the U.S. homeland? That may seem unlikely, but they've done it before. When we come back, we'll look at how that attack on 9/11 changed the world we live in. And we'll talk with a man who played a central role in responding to that attack, Dick Cheney. We'll ask him how we should deal now with what he thinks is an even greater threat.